You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. This episode is sponsored by Demand Derivatives, a startup futures exchange and clearinghouse trading the world's major assets in a creative new way. You already trade on an exchange. Here is your chance to own one. Before they approach large strategic partners for funding, the pioneering team at Demand Derivatives launched a crowdfunding portal so that regular traders have the chance to buy shares. Learn more and become a part of this revolutionary fintech project now at demandderivatives.com/crowdfunding. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for episode 2 here of your bi-weekly options extravaganza known as the Option Block, what the cool kids call the old OB. My name is Mark Longo from the optionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever compelling, at least we hope so, Options Insider Radio Network. Reminding you, wherever you get this content, keep rating and reviewing. It really does help all the legion of new listeners discover the program and indeed discover the full network out there. Of course, keep those questions and comments coming too. We do love to hear from all of you guys and gals out there. Just don't leave the questions in, let's say, like an iTunes review, because those tend to be a little bit slower for us in terms of when we can get those onto the show. If you have a timely question, hit us up via the website, via social media, via all the other stuff going on there. All right, so let's see what we got going on here on the show today. I do believe the boys over there at the pit are busy doing their educational session today. We'll see if we can drag them kicking and screaming away from their mentees to chat with us here on the show today. But we are also joined, as always, by the man, the myth, and legend himself. The man who still, I guess, by overall sheer number of victories, is the reigning, defending 80s theme song, now expanded to be 80s TV and movie theme song contest. None other than Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, a.k.a. at Mike TOSAW, that guy you know who's blowing up Twitter out there. Uncle Mike, welcome back to the program, sir.
Happy to be here, but I will give the title to Sebastian. He won it this week, so he has the belt right now. So I will give it to him. But if he doesn't show up today, then I'm taking it back.
There you go. He forfeits. He loses his claim to the throne. But we never lose our claim on the markets. Let's get to it. A little bit of the old trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block, the portion of the show we break down what the heck is trading, what is lighting up our screens out there. And it seemed like earlier in the session, the markets were mostly green. And we had the S&P and the NASDAQ in the green. The Dow was kind of struggling a little bit. Now as the day has progressed, session has progressed, we've seen starting to get a little more in the red out there. S&P ticking in the red now, off nearly 0.1%. Dow closing in off 0.5%. And NASDAQ struggling to stay a foot there in the green, up about it, just tick down again, up about 0.1%. But it seems like that sucking sound is going to tick it down a little bit. Actually, the S&P off down about almost 0.3% now. So, yeah, that sucking sound to the dark side, maybe going to drag the NASDAQ down with it. A lot of things looming out there. Folks are spooked, obviously, about valuations. Also, lingering news out of India that is not exactly good on the pandemic front. So a lot of things weighing on the mind out there. Of course, we have earnings season going on right now as well. We'll get into all that in a second. Got some new reports for you, hot off the presses from our friends over there at Orax. That means interesting stuff coming into the show. Kicking off the show, we had VIX at about a 17.15. Of course, I have a feeling that's going to change once we start getting a little bit more meat on the bone there from a vol sell-off perspective. Let's see. Let's see if that sell-off exacerbates, if that VIX can stay threatening that 17 handle, or if it can pop back up a little bit. VVIX at about a 110. So that's right around, by the way, VIX is down about 1 1/3 points from our last show. VVIX almost exactly where it was last show. It's at about a 110 right now. It's up about a point. It was a 109 on Monday. VXX giving up some of that tasty, delicious ghost, 9.8. Coming at showtime off about 0.6 point. You know, today's the last day to get in on that VXX sub 10 action before it reverse splits 4 for 1, kicking off tomorrow there. So if you don't want any of those weird legacy stub quotes, you just don't want to deal with the reverse split thing, get the heck out of Dodge before the close today. New beast coming online tomorrow. Last time they did it, it was like VXX2. It was all sorts of weird. We'll see what they end up doing this time. And of course, Vol Q, aka the at the money vol, the NASDAQ, a little bit shy of the 20 handle at about a 1975, puts it down about 1 1/4. That's the first time it's budged in a while. It's been kind of locked at 21 for the better part of the last few weeks. So even though NASDAQ has been moving, which is kind of interesting. So interesting to see that Vol Q finally selling off a little bit out there. And Mr. Uncle Mike, it started off kind of like an Uncle Mike kind of day. Then it seems like perhaps the market gods are no longer smiling upon the Uncle Mike type of frenzy, but we'll see. The day is young. Uncle Mike, sir, what is lighting up your tape out there in this still right now slightly Uncle Mike kind of day?
Day is young. Something must have just happened in the last 2 minutes as I was getting ready to go on the show. I turned off my news ticker for a little bit, but looks like the market did not like what happened 2 minutes ago or something like that. But had nearly a 20-point drop in the S&P. So we'll have to look into that as the show goes on. But in terms of what's happening overall right now, we're still below the all-time highs that we made last Friday. Not by a lot, but a little bit. Looks like we were going to make a run at them earlier, up till about a few minutes ago, and we're right on the edge of it. So curious to see what's going to happen with everything that's going on right now on the day-to-day. It's going to be an exciting close, that I can tell you for sure, for these last couple hours of the looks like we have a capital gains tax proposal that apparently the market did not like. But anyway, just in looking at that, it'll be interesting to see how the markets react to that going into the close. That's for sure. What is interesting to me, though, or what is, I guess, kind of exciting to me, is from the standpoint that we're not having this treasury / tech correlation like we have been. So we're not moving. They don't seem to be moving in lockstep with one another. The yield along with, or the 10-year yield along with tech. So we don't seem to be having that. 10-year yield's relatively flat on the day-to-day. So we're not really getting a lot of that. So that's what's happening right now with what's lighting up my tape in terms of the sector analysis. Today's a day to where what we have going on in the marketplace, the main thing that's getting hit, at least as of right now, appears to be the consumer staples, along with financials to some extent. That's bringing the market down initially. So be curious to see how markets are going to continue to react to this and what's happening throughout the rest of the day today.
Indeed. We got Tony Weber in the chat saying, what did Mark do to spook the market? Hey, don't blame me. It's not me. I didn't scare anybody. I'm just the facts, ma'am. I'm just presenting things as they are right now. Let's see how things are right now coming into doing it a little bit earlier here in the show. So these numbers going to be a little bit lower than they normally are here. But VIX, as of right now, still pretty light at about 157,000 contracts. The ADV just a tick over 500,000 right now. But we'll see if that number starts to pick up, if we do indeed see the worms start turning, whether it is indeed this capital gains tax, something else that is spooking folks out there. Either way, the worm turning a bit out there right now. SPY at a little bit north of 2 million, about 2.05 million right now. The ADV about 4.3 million. And the S at about 450,000. The ADV is kind of locked out there at about 1.2 million as well. It hasn't really budged much over the course of the past month and change. Q's closing in on 420,000 contracts. The ADV about 1.2 million. Got a little ways to go to hit that, but we'll see if today's turn can perhaps account for a little bit more paper out there. And small caps actually looking pretty robust. Small caps at 350,000 contracts. The ADV 583,000. So they're already past the halfway point, the point of no return out there in small caps. Of course, if you want all things small cap, stay tuned. We'll be beaming into the FTSE Russell studios a little bit later on TWIFO to get all the action out there in small cap land. Spoiler alert, it's been a pretty action-packed week for all things small caps out there. They're up 2%, they're down 2%, dogs and cats living together. If you want some action, you want some vol, small caps have not disappointed you this week. Let's see if the top 10 most actives can disappoint us. And this is a weird one, listeners. So let's get into it. Again, we're running these numbers a little bit earlier than we normally do, right around 10, 15 minutes earlier. So that could maybe account for some of these changes, but not enough to the size of the changes we're seeing in a second. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Number 10 cost you $191,000. That's actually not bad paper for this part of the day here. Usually it's around a little bit around that level, maybe a little bit higher for a very active day. But again, we usually run these numbers a little bit later in the day. So AMD right now breaking into the top 10, 191,000. AMD is kind of the big engine that could really, because it keeps fighting its way into the top 10 day in, day out. It's not really making the headlines like these other hot names, the FANG names or the meme names are making, but it's in there reliably day after day, putting up the numbers, 191,000 today. Number 9, this is a newcomer to the odd block craze, or I should say really the most actives, and indeed a newcomer to our list. This is Skills, ticker symbol SKLZ. This is an online mobile multiplayer competition platform that's integrated into iOS and Android games. Just look at the ticker and the price, 16.5 right now. This feels kind of like a meme, kind of hot Reddit name stock. Either way, it's good for 206,000 contracts on the tape. This one, the list has this chart has all the hallmarks of Squeezy McSqueezerstein, as a meatball used to like to say. It was trading $12.50 on Tuesday. And even looks like earlier this morning, it was at trading 1941 before giving up nearly $3 of that today. So Skills is moving. This thing is an interesting one and a newcomer to our odd block. 206,000 contracts on the tape out there for Skills with a Z. You gotta love that. All right, number 8, Viacom back in there. Of course, they've been popping in a few times now ever since the whole Archegos fiasco over there. Number 8, 225,000 contracts. Number 7, we got AMC going back Mimi to AMC, 227,000 contracts. So we got Viacom, AMC, and Skills, 7, 8, and 9 there on our top 10. So one of those weird days out there, listeners. Number 6, I haven't talked about this one in a while as well. This is Nikola. This is, of course, the zero emission, the EV company that had, let's say, some issues out there of late. But today they're looking pretty good, up about 160, up 15.5%, trading nearly $12, $11.90, and good enough for number 6 for 274,000 contracts. Now we're used to seeing Neo, used to seeing Tesla in the top 10, not so much Nikola. Number 5, Palantir. They're kind of a staple now. 334,000 contracts on the tape for Palantir. Number 4, the aforementioned Neo. 473,000. This one is continuing to just light up the tape. Number 3 is probably the biggest surprise, even more surprising than Skills breaking into the top 10. It's Apple. Yes, I said Apple at number 3, listener. I can't remember. It's been a while. I think it's since Neo, maybe Ford even, when Ford erupted to the top of the list very briefly. That's the last time Apple was really toppled from the number 1 spot. All the way down to number 3, a paltry 595,000 1,000 contracts. Usually it's about 2x that right now. So that's pretty light for Apple. Of course, they're coming off their big announcement yesterday, maybe a little bit of the buy the old rumor and kind of just, the fact. Who cares? I don't know. Either way, not a lot of paper on the tape right now. Number 2, our old friend Telephone. You can tell it's earnings season again because weird names popping in there. 663,000 contracts. Number 2, AT&T. I haven't seen them in forever. It means you know what number 1 is. It's Tesla. 787,000 contracts. Again, that's pretty light for number 1, but that's where we are today. We got Skills, we got Viacom, we got a weird top 10 here today, listeners, which makes it fun. Let's look really quickly and see what's the most biased. We actually have a 2-way tie for the most biased paper. It's Viacom and AT&T, both at 79% of their flow coming on the call side of the ledger. So even some of these crazy ones like Skills, only 2/3 of the paper is on the call side. So it's a little bit more balanced than AT&T and Viacom. And you know what's not balanced? It's the Rock Lobster, a.k.a. Mr. Andrew GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com by way of some crazy mentoring thing he's got going on today. But you know what? We dragged him away. We said, nope, no mentoring today. You're going to come talk to our people. So Mr. Rock Lobster, A, welcome back to the program. And B, let's light up your tape on this kind of a bit of a worm turning kind of day, sir.
Besides the power gremlins coming and cut my power out, the stormy Maine coast.
I thought you were off the grid
today.
I thought you had the kids on like a little bicycle just generating your own power.
You know what? They're on strike. And I couldn't get them back on. I couldn't get them. So we're dealing with trees. We have all these trees that keep falling on power lines. So yeah, we had a very big mentoring day. So it was great at Option Pit. But they kicked me out because, of course, I couldn't get on any webinars. So, listen, what do you guys think about this observation? I thought there was definitely a bid for VIX into this trial, into the Derek Chauvin trial. I felt like there was, because the evidence was out, and I think there was some serious, everybody was a little worried about a redo of last summer. Notice yesterday the verdict came out, the night before last, right? And vol just went away. And today it's kind of the same thing. It's sort of slowly going down. So I thought there was a little bid there. There was a lot of unknowns after that. And I thought, I remember last year we were in Chicago. So anyway, I thought that was not a great day, obviously, for the country, but anyway, I thought that was, as for an observation-wise, I found that interesting. And besides, AT&T is making money, which I thought was pretty surprising. I don't think there's a company on the planet that owes more money than they do. But those are the two things letting at my tape as vol to kind of, as my power went out, as vol was kind of continuing a 2-day decline.
It seems like the connection gods are not smiling upon you either. There's like your phone connection there is a little bit weak. Whatever that tree is landed on your connection. Let's see if we could fix your connection a little bit there, Mr. Rock Lobster. Get you back a little bit so that it sounds a little better for the folks out there. Let's head on out now. Of course, I mentioned it is earnings season. So let's see what we got lighting off. We got new reports hot off the presses from our friends over there at Orats. Let's get into it here. Let's start off. Let's see. Let's go to, we were just talking about them, AT&T. Let's get them up here. They were popping off before the bell this morning, hence their large amount of options paper out there today. And let's see, AT&T, they were going into this report. They were at $30.11. They were pricing in 2.4%, and they delivered, lo and behold, double that, 4.8%. So there we go. A little bit of outperformance from an earnings vol perspective. Dare I say it? Has the worm turned? It's far too early to make that call. I made that call last cycle, listeners. Look how well it worked out. So let's hold off on that call for now, even though it would be nice to see a little bit of that come in back in there. What else we got here? Las Vegas Sands. Let's see. They are at 60 3/4 as of this report. They are popping off. They popped off yesterday after the bell. They were pricing in 5.2%, and they delivered 3.6%. So a little bit of underperformance there. Good old Love. They were popping off before the bell as well, a.k.a. Southwest Airlines. They were at 62.04. They were pricing in 3.7%, and Wah, wah. They delivered 1.3%. So perhaps I got a little bit too excited too soon. Let's see what else we got. American Airlines, going back to the airlines as well. 2101 going into their announcement. They were pricing in a whopping 5%, and they delivered a comparatively meager 0.6%. They moved 13 cents. Well, there we go. So much for the great hope of outperforming from an overall earnings perspective. We had some big names popping off this week. We had Chipotle, we had Discover, Southwest, of course, Mattel, American Airlines, Intel popping off today, later after the bell today, and WWE popping off after the bell today. We'll see how the pandemic has treated them out there. You folks know what to do to get those reports. Go to theoptionsinsider.com. Click on them for yourselves. I'm just looking here really quickly to see. Oh, Chipotle, here we go. We do have a move result report for my former stealth Apple, not quite so stealthy, not quite so Apple-y anymore either. They're 1507, 1507, 62 for Chipotle. Man, I remember them back in the early days of that stock. Let's see. They were pricing in a juicy 4.4%. They delivered a whopping 0.7%. So there you go, listeners. If you haven't had it beaten into your head by now, don't buy earnings vol right now. Don't do it. We always counsel you away from trading around earnings anyway, but in this case in particular, stay away from buying any vol around earnings. Because guess what, listeners? We already got the earnings season report lighting up now. So far for this year, this cycle, we've got a whopping 56% average in terms of how much bang you got for that earnings buck. So that's looking even worse so far than last season. Remember, it's very early days still. But so far, at least, outside of the one or two aberrant names out there like AT&T, not a lot of love for the juice. Let's look really quickly ahead and see what's popping off a little bit later today. My old stomping grounds, Intel, they were at 63.70. As of this report, they were pricing in 4.25%. In the past, actually, I take that back. They're pricing in $3.05. In the past, they've moved 4.25. So again, they got the memo out there, a little bit light on the juice front. Snap, they were at 58.30. They were pricing in nearly $7, $6.87. And in the past, they moved nearly $9. So they've clearly gotten the memo out there as well. And, Uncle Mike's favorite, WWE, after the bell today. They're at 56.58. Let's see, $4.19 what they're pricing in. In the past, they moved $4.38. So they've gotten the memo out there as well. Light juice all around the board is kind of the order of the day out there. All right, yeah, let's get to it then. A little bit of the old odd block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the odd block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the odd block, the portion of the show where we get a little weird, we get a little wild, we get a little crazy. Let's see what our Eye of Sauron has found for us today. First, we're going back to a name we were just talking about out there. Good old Las Vegas Sands, ticker symbol LVS. Trading right now about a little bit shy of $60, about $59.80, off about $1 or about 1.6%. We just talked about their performance from an earnings perspective. Let's look back at their performance over the course of the past year. A year ago, not a lot of folks really looking into gaming and hotel and leisure activities, so they were trading about $41. They've had a few fits and starts along the way. They rallied all the way up on June 8th. They got to 55.64, so not that far from where they are right now, and then gave it all right back by, let's see, June 26th. They were trading $43 again. They did that dance a few times. They got up to 50 and change in July, sold back off in August, up again in July, and on September got up to 53 again, and then gave it back again down to about 46. Did that a number of times, and they finally popped from 46 in October up to about 58 in early November, and they kind of stayed at that level for a while, then gave it up again. In January, they were trading 48 again, and then since January, they've really kind of taken off again. They've rallied from 48 all the way up to about 65 in early March, and they struggled to maintain that lofty level, bounced off it a few times, And looks like they bounced off it again recently because they sold off again down to about 59 and change. And then they're rallying up. They rallied up to about 60. And then it looks like they're giving it off again today. So they've had a hard time maintaining their upside, even though net on the year, they have rallied a wee bit up about almost 20 points from where they were about a year ago. So a good run net, even though it hasn't been exactly just buy and hold and woohoo, party time out here. They've had a lot of fits and starts, and they still are off their highs of the year, which is nearly $67. Let's see what our Eye of Sauron found out there in this post-earnings slew of paper. It looks like the SEP 65 calls. That's an interesting strike, and also pretty meaty strike. They went up 5,775 times for $3.39. So these were $3.20 at $3.35. These folks said, in order to get nearly 6,000 done, we got to go a little bit through that offer, all the way out to nearly $3.40, going up on the Amex. Again, this is post earnings. It was done with the stock was a wee bit lower. The stock was 58.51, so $1.30 lower than it is right now when they scooped these. So these are already looking pretty good, even though these are pretty juicy. About nearly a 40 vol, about a 39 vol here for this Las Vegas Sands. But again, given this chart over the past year, you can't really argue that this name isn't warranted out here. We kind of talked about this one already. They kind of underperformed from an earnings perspective and certainly underperformed from an earnings vol perspective. But our friend here obviously thinks perhaps they will outperform from an upside perspective. That 65 level seems to be where they've been challenged in the past. They've kind of gotten through that and then given it up a few times. So let's see if they can maintain it. He's got all the way to September. He's buying some time. So he's getting a lot of time for his pretty pricey $3.39 for these bad boys. Let's try again. Let's see if the Rock Lobster is alive, if the GIOVINAZZI compound is still on the face of the earth. Mr. Rock Lobster, A, are you there? And B, if so, what do you think of these Las Vegas Sands pretty pricey calls?
I'm here. I just hopefully the signal's good enough for you to hear me.
I can mostly hear you, so let's go for it.
I don't know. The technology gods are really crushing me today. I think those Sands calls are ridiculously pricey.
Yes, they're juicy.
You know what? I think the first 3 months of the year spoiled, just crazy upside. We had a 30 vol market and the SPX was at an all-time high. You don't get that very often, right? It was a stack, it was EV, it was anything, to the moon. And I'm sure the casinos are going to come back and people are vaccinating, but I don't know if it's a pricey call. That's all I'm going to say on that one. I'd rather do the buy right, I think.
Yeah, this one is kind of hard to swallow here. $3.40 for an already kind of outlandish call here in Las Vegas. I mean, this thing moves. It's moves, but yeah, that's a rough one, and you're usually a very good chance you're going to be wearing that. Tell you what, just because it's so juicy, so lofty, we'll come back to this one, see how our friend fares with $3.40 nearly 6,000 times, or if he gave up the ghost out there. He did it post earnings, so sometimes if you can catch it right in the vol crush immediately after earnings, you can maybe get some decent vol levels, but it doesn't seem to be the case. He still paid a 40 vol, and he paid a ridiculous amount of premium for these, so perhaps he got in a little bit too early, even though the underlying is moving his way. If I pull up these calls right now, it would be interesting to see how much the vol crush has impacted them versus the old Delta versus Vega discussion, but we'll do that a little bit later. We have to keep on rolling with our review here. Let's go back out now, listeners. We like to pay off our Wayback Machine. We have so many names, so many trades we're keeping an eye on for you here, listeners. Let's try to pay off a few more. Let's go back. Let's do double duty to our show back on March 11th, month and change ago here. We had a twofer on that show. First off, we looked at Constellium SC. Oh, I remember this one. This was the rolled aluminum. We had a lot of fun saying aluminum on the show that day. And I have a feeling I'm probably going to do that again today because it's just fun. Let's see. Ticker symbol out here. Where are we? CSTM. This one at the time he profiled 5,750 of the March 16 calls going up for 38 cents right off the bid. The market was 35 cents at 70. So it was pretty wide. But they ended up getting nearly a 50 vol for these, about a 48, almost 49 vol on these bad boys. The stock was $15.77 when they put this trade up. Let's see how they fared, shall we? There were earnings, but not in this cycle. The earnings were on are on April 28th, coming up next week. So, and you know what? This guy wrote these, and he had to kind of take the Tums and batten down the hatches a little bit here, because these things were looking pretty rough for a little bit. They moved against him pretty aggressively. Again, he sold the 16 strike for 38 cents, listeners. The stock blew through that strike pretty quickly, got up to $17.08. So he was wearing it for more than $1 in the wrong direction there. And that was right before expiration, too. So this guy probably was thinking, hey, I'm getting rid of my stock at a less than favorable level. But you know what? Kind of gritted his teeth. He dug in and he held on, and it ended up, he got the rare turning of the worm in his favor right before expiration. Think about that, listeners. How many times have you had a similar scenario and you were hoping for that worm to turn and it didn't go your way? This time, this guy, he had the market gods smile upon him, because the stock closed at $15.82 on expiration. He got to keep all of his 38 cents 5,750 times, because these were still open at expiration. So he pocketed almost $220,000. So not bad, but he did have to sweat for it a little bit, Mr. Rock Lobster. What are your thoughts on these calls and the fact that our friend gritted through it and it ended up working out in his favor? Very rarely, sir, does that happen.
Yes, I'm kind of writing some VXX puts that I probably kept on a little too long. So I can every once in a while it happens, but usually you just don't get that lucky.
I just did that before the show. I got rid of mine, so I could go into the show free and clear without having to think about those.
And if the power didn't go out, I would have done it myself. But I can't even get a phone app to work right now. So somebody is just drilling me from above. So anyway, I'll have to deal with the split, I guess, tomorrow. Anyway, one way or the other.
Yeah, I thought you wanted to avoid your little stub quotes. I thought you were getting the heck out of Dodge before.
I totally want to. I don't know if I'm going to be able to close. I
Power gods.
Phone app and close.
Now you're starting to see the dark side of living off the grid in the compound in Maine there, but you want to trade all day. That does make it hard. If you were like a goat farmer, yeah, you're good, but you need a little bit of connectivity to do your business, sir.
You do. 100%. So my only saving grace is that, it's not a catastrophically big position at this point. But anyway, it's still annoying as heck.
So what are your thoughts about this guy holding on? Do you think he should have rolled the calls, gotten out of Dodge, or is it better to be smart than good at the end of the day?
Well, it's always better to be lucky.
I mean, lucky. I meant lucky. Yes, lucky than good.
Yeah, I think he took the luck. I think he took the luck factor. But you said the open interest was long. So did he take delivery on them?
He left it on. So these calls ended up expiring worthless. So he's good. He kept his 38 cents. So he's happy.
Yeah. So he didn't have any problems. So it works out sometimes that way. So anyway,
he lives to write another day.
Buy right? Really? What's the worst that could happen?
The stock plunges to zero.
Guess, right. The stock plunges and you're miserable. So
yes,
I think the guy, he just is taking his luck and leaving.
Yeah, he got lucky. He's happy. He'll take his roughly $220,000 and live to write another day. We'll see if he's going to come in and write a similar strike again out there. Now let's move on to another. There was a weird one on that show, listeners. A weird one that's even hard to find now because this ticker has since gone the way of the dodo. If you remember on that show, listeners, there was some call love in a ticker QEP Resources. This was a nat gas company. And we talked about it on the time at the show. There was a takeover of this name that was initiated back in December. Diamondback Energy was going to acquire this QEP Resources in an all-stock deal. Of course, what happened between December and March is that nat gas blew up. So shareholders were left holding the bag. They were kind of angry. So a big shareholder, I think right at the day of our show, right before it was Glazer Capital. They put out a big letter to the rest of the shareholders saying, no, we have to vote against this deal, this all-stock deal. They had some ratio of shares I forgot which one it was here, but it's severely underpriced compared to where NatGas was trading in the market. It's severely underpriced, this QEP resources. So it seemed like at the time someone was coming in and putting a fair bit of capital on the line to bet that this deal was not going to happen, that the acquisition was going to be called off, and that QEP would be free to trade at higher levels in the open market. Because someone came out and gobbled up 5,000 of the April 5 calls for a whopping 25 cents. And that was the offer. They lifted it. And what's weird about that is that was well above where it was trading at the time. It was trading, I think, $4.25, which is right around the ratio of the price for compared to that Diamondback, obviously the stock ratio there. And someone was clearly wagering that something was going to happen soon and this thing was going to pop. And they traded nearly 8,000 total on the day. So more came in after the fact. Again, this was an acquisition target. It seemed like the price was kind of a done deal. It wasn't really going to budge that much farther than the $4.25 level that it was on. And yeah, that looks like that was the case because the deal did go through. They completed their acquisition about a week later on March 17th. So it appears like this might have been this Glazer Capital backing up their open letter with some call paper here. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. It seems like whoever that was, though, they wasted some cash because the acquisition was completed on March 17th. QEP is no more. They were acquired by Diamondback here. And so these calls go the way of the dodo. And he paid almost 95 vol for these things, listeners. And they wasted about 125. That's just on the 5,000 lot. You add in another 3,000, it gets even worse. But yeah, this whoever this was wasted a significant amount of money on a complete flyer. A lot of things had to happen. You had to have a deal that was already kind of approved to get effectively reneged on and rejected by the board and by the shareholders. It seemed like a long shot, and someone put some not insubstantial resources behind it. But it seems like, Mr. Rock Lobster, these were quite literal lottery tickets, and unfortunately, they did not scratch off a winner, sir.
It sounds very much like they did not scratch off a winner, but that is I think it is a reasonable play with options to bet that there's going to be a new bid or something like that on a takeover. So I don't, they're not. It is totally spec. It is a lot of fun. That's what part of trading is sometimes. You just don't take, you don't take the rent money, the house money, the food money, the medical money, and you do stuff like that. But, every once in a while, if you think something's going to happen, it could be worth the shot, but you have to be able to accept the downside, which is you have all that money is gone, which is kind of like a lottery ticket.
Yeah, it was a pretty pricey lottery ticket. And that is totally what it was. A lottery ticket. It was pretty much a binary trade. This was a yes or no. The yes, and you're looking all right, but there's no getting out of it. There's no scratching for any of this. You're not getting a 25-cent bid to get out of these. These things are gone. So that's effectively what they did. And they wasted a couple $100,000 on it. And it unfortunately did not work out in their favor, listeners. But it always works out in our favor. It's your questions. And it's Mail Block Thursday. So let's get to them.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the Mail Block.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Mail Block portion of the show where you folks take the reins, your questions and comments. Really quick before we get into all that, we got some audience polls to pay off here. One we've already discussed a little bit. I just want to refresh it. And then we have one that just went live right before the show. Kind of a fun, easy, silly one to wrap up the week here. But first, we talked last time really quickly on the show about minis. I was kind of surprised at the lack of mini love out there. And most people I've been talking to lately, particularly in the business, have been kind of down on the prospect of bringing back minis as well. Check out our interview we did on Tuesday as well with the former chairman of the P-Coast over there. Not a big fan of minis coming back either. As of this poll, we asked you, should minis come back or should they stay dead? And minis coming back won almost 60%, 59.5%. But no, they should stay dead. Got 40.5% of the vote. That's closer than I thought it would be. And maybe minis aren't a sure thing for coming back this year. It seemed like the retail explosion, the one lot frenzy out there made this a no-brainer, but perhaps not. Perhaps we spoke too soon. Now we have a fun one out there right now, listeners. Go play if you haven't already. At Options went live just before the show. Very simple one to end up the week here. Quite simply, which level will we hit first? Gave you a bunch of choices. A VIX of a 14, so a 14 handle in the VIX. SPX of 4,300, so a little bit north of where we are right now. It was about 130 points north of it right before showtime. Bitcoin at a 70,000. So that's a bit of a run. I think that was about 15,000 points, I think, right around the start of the show, a little bit more. Or a WTI, which is the crude oil, of course, at a 70. Of course, we've been hovering around a little bit low 60s range for a little bit out there of late. So some fun. Which of these will we hit first? If we could have a fifth, we could say neither. A huge sell-off and everything. But that's a conversation for another day. Let's go back around the horn. Mr. Uncle Mike, A, were you surprised that our audience, they wanted minis, but perhaps not as overwhelmingly as I thought? And then B, do you have a vote in our poll here about which of these levels will hit first? And then C, more importantly, where do you think our audience is lining up?
A, I am still surprised with that. I figured there'd be more demand and more desire for the mini options. I know I'd like them. I would use them for sure. I think it would be a great addition to our covered call portfolio. We would definitely use them. So I would love to have them because if we have certain people that can have 460 shares and can't have 500 shares of something, the minis would be amazing. I would love them. So I am surprised because I'm willing to bet there are more people out there that have similar sentiments. But as Mark Longo likes to say la vie. In terms of the poll, oil, I could see maybe. VIX 14, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Bitcoin, maybe, but I'm a bull. I'm going with SPX, and I think the audience is going to lean my way as well. So I think SPX 4,300 is my vote.
And then before you get in the arguments, well, if you see 4,300, we'll probably see a 14 in the VIX, so they'll probably be simultaneous. We're not doing that. Which one we hit first? That's all we care about here. So 4,300 in the S&P. I had a feeling you might go that way. I guess if we had gold in here, maybe you'd be leaning that way as well, or perhaps silver. Mr. Rock Lobster, you already weighed in on the minis. I think you were not a fan. You wanted them to stay dead as well, which is kind of interesting. A little bit of the old curmudgeon in you coming back out. A, do you have a vote here in our poll? And then B, more importantly, what do you think our audience is voting for?
I think we'll see VIX 14 first as these vaccines come online, and I think the audience is pretty bullish overall, so they're going to see 4,300.
Interesting. It's still early days right now, but it was kind of split pretty even very early in the voting, like 25% or close to it for each. Looks like Bitcoin has taken the bit in its teeth now, pun intended, with about 44.4% of the vote for Bitcoin at 70,000, followed by number 2, the S at 4,300, 22.2%. VIX at 14, 18.5%. No love for WTI 70, only 14.8%. But again, it's early days. Make your voice heard over there at Options. This is going to run for a few days into the weekend, so you got a chance, if you're listening on the podcast, too, to get in there and make your voice heard. If you listen live, you get bumped up to the top of the list, like a lot of our fun listeners do, including Mr. Tony Weber, who I do believe was one of the grand prize winner of our Broker Madness contest. By the way, the folks at the folks at Lightspeed, formerly the keepers of LiveVol, will be coming on the network soon to celebrate their victory and talk about why they think they triumphed in that tournament. So stay tuned for that. Tony wants to know, on the ORATS data, any thoughts on why buying premium is not working? Is it due to the drop in overall VIX? Is the Robinhood crew inflating the price, trying to hit homers? You know, this is one of the mysteries wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in an enigma that I've been trying to solve for the better part of a year. I thought it seemed like a no-brainer going into the first major earnings cycle of the pandemic last year, that we had major companies saying, you know what? We have no idea what the hell the future. Usually when they revise their guidance, that's going to cause a lot of havoc with the stock. When they completely renounce all guidance, that should be the huge catalyst for volatility. What we saw was, time and again, that was not the case. The market just shrugged that off as if it was kind of immaterial to the future of the stock. And it never translated into any vol. And why that is still a bit of a mystery to me. I mean, some arguments you might hear about there, maybe the Fed coming in and easing things. It sucked up some of that vol a little bit. Of course, we had the vol coming in at the same time. That probably didn't help. But in general, the individual vol on some of these names, given what they were reporting and what was going on in them, it should have moved quite a bit. And it just didn't. These things, it's one of the great mysteries of the pandemic. And I've talked about this with Matt many times, who crunches these numbers, and he's still kind of he's still kind of mystified by it as well as to, and then cycle after cycle, it's been the same thing. And it's like, well, we don't know what's going to happen for the next year. That's pretty much, that's the synopsis of the entire earnings for the last year is that. And yet it has not materialized into any really substantial moves at all. So the answer, I wish I had it. I've been kind of puzzled by this myself for some time. I'm still digging for the answer, Tony, but I don't have it off the top of my head. I don't know, Mr. Andrew, this is something we talked about before, but are you still mystified about the earnings vol underperformance? Or are you kind of just like the rest of the market? You're like, that's what we get.
I just, what I think is stocks are so already, they're so bid, right? Stocks have already run a lot of them so far. And to be honest, like the earnings don't mean anything because there's the whole COVID thing everything is a big ball of confusion. So, they're going to price earnings. What can a stock really do that it hasn't already done? Look at Google, look at what can the stock do? They're already gone to the moon. So, are they going to get that extra 20%, 50%? A year ago, nobody knew what was going to happen anyway. So I don't think there's any good relative springboard for company earnings right now because the future is still, I think earnings wise, still kind of murky, and it's been murky for a year, and until things kind of get back to normal. But I think the whole earnings picture is going to be a big wash. And that's another reason I don't think we're seeing a lot of response out of VIX or out of all. It's like it's kind of meh on it. So I just don't think we're going to see a whole lot. A lot of buying has already been, let's just call it, all the stocks have been pre-bought.
They've all been bought. They all are just hodling all day long. Yeah, and you have so many companies just in the grips of external factors beyond their control, which is effectively where most of them are right now. That probably contributes to it as well. What they say is like spitting into the wind when they're at the whims of the market zephyrs just carrying them hither and yon, right? So, but it is a weird phenomenon. I'm with you, Tony, and it's something I've been analyzing for the better part of a year, and I'm not sure if I still have the right answer for it yet, but getting closer maybe. But yeah, this is definitely one in the future. There will be case studies and analysis about how is this possible? Again, 2020 and into 2021 now, a year where many things were unprecedented and then are now kind of just commonplace. All right. This is the fun one. This comes from Bill's in Tokyo. So I guess Bill's writing to us from Tokyo. Glad you're enjoying the show over there in Tokyo, sir. He says, here, I like a subject, RE the 80s. I like his question already. I don't even know what it is. He says, there was an earth-changing movement that started in the 80s for cartoons. And those enlightened few moved away from G.I. Joe and Transformers and found Robotech and Captain Harlock. Whoa, that one I've never heard of. In a world where characters died, got shot, etc., instead of everyone parachuting down to safety. Anyone else on the option block team agree? Long live Robotech. Well, guessing the fact that he lives in Tokyo, he's a little partial to a little anime, shall we say. I definitely know Robotech. I watched it a bit as a kid. It always seemed to me like it was a bunch of jet fires from Transformer just fighting each other, and it didn't really excite me. Captain Harlock, I have never heard. I'll have to check that one out. That doesn't sound like a Japanese one, but again, I don't know. I'm with you. It was always kind of silly in G.I. Joe where something would explode, and of course, at the last minute, the parachute would come out and everyone would land safely. And they're shooting lasers and guns and explosives everywhere, and not a single person is really killed or even hurt very much. So yeah, that was always kind of silly to me, even as a kid. This, of course, listeners, is in reference to the G.I. Joe theme that we did for the show there on Monday. But that's out of my wheelhouse. Mr. Uncle Mike, you like a bit of 80s shows. A, were you a Robotech fan? And B, have you ever heard of Captain Harlock? Because I have not.
No, I have not actually. I was a G.I. Joe guy, so I did not see it. And that's what I grew up with in the 80s. You had the A-Team to where they'd always shoot everybody and no one would ever get hit. And then G.I. Joe, where you have the parachutes of safety. So I guess that teaches us as kids that war and guns are safe, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. But, that's the way it was back then. I mean, no one ever dies in TV.
It's amazing kids weren't just spraying each other with machine guns all the time, because why not? Doesn't hurt, right? Can't possibly hurt you. A-Team would walk into a room, they would empty 3 clips, and then no one would be hit. So yes, I'll check out this Captain Harlock here, Bill from Tokyo. That sounds like an interesting one, but I'm not familiar. Does it have a sweet theme song? That's kind of one of the hooks. G.I. Joe, obviously, as we played earlier in the week in the show, had many cool theme songs. So Robotech, I think it was this kind of vaguely Japanese tune, as I recall, which didn't really rock with me as a kid. But yeah, I guess you could say I had a Robotech action figure, though, because that's what Jetfire was from the Transformers, right? He was just a rip-off of Robotech. All right, let's see. This one was kind of a bit of a disturbing question here. It comes from Halal. It's kind of just emblematic of what we're seeing in the space a lot right now and what we're seeing in our quest. It's not mean or anything. It's just makes me a little sad. It says, hi, I bought my first option this morning for Bank of America for $40.08 for this Friday. Would it go up tomorrow, you think? Yeah. And he follows up with, I bought the Bank of America option. And so we wrote to him and said, what did you buy? Give us more details. He wrote back and said, I bought the Bank of America option, and I bought it on Webull. And they wrote back again to say, this says the max loss is unlimited. Can you tell me what that is? And then he followed up with a final question of, if my option expires tomorrow, what time would it expire? I'm in Chicago. Well, the last part of that we could do pretty easily. Options that expire on the Friday, most of your equity options like Bank of America are going to expire at the close of Friday here in Chicago. It's 3:02 if you want to be precise over there. But of course, we said before, keep an eye on the after hours because things can happen in the after hours of these equities that could make you want to either proactively go and exercise an option that's out of the money or perhaps put in some other contra exercise orders. So you have to be careful. Hopefully you close it out before expiration. But I'm guessing from the earlier parts of your question that that's already a little bit advanced for you. We'd love to see the new listeners. You'd love to see the new people coming in. But I think before you start trading, like, for example, there is no Bank of America option. That's not a thing. You have to have, of course, the month, the strike, all those kind of things go with it. And that's what you're trading. You didn't just buy, there's not one Bank of America call and one Bank of America put. And I love that the fact that Robinhood and Webull and all these others have opened the doors to a lot of new entrants into the space. But this is kind of an example of maybe they should hopefully do a little bit more on the educational front out there. Again, you can't really lay all this at the feet of the brokers either, but someone comes in and they just think they bought the Bank of America option. They don't even know what it is. They say their max loss on buying a call is unlimited, which is clearly not the case. So either the broker's wrong or they're reading it wrong. So there's a lot in there that's kind of troubling. So I would encourage you, Halal, and anyone else, first off, and we told him, close this out. Close it out. You're clearly not ready to be trading real money and options. Maybe start doing some paper trading with your brokers. Go look at whatever educational offerings they have available. We have, of course, deep educational offerings here on the network that are all available very easily and for free. Start there. Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio have been running for years. Check them out on our network. You can start with those. Go from episode 1 all the way to 100 plus of each of those. You listen to all that, you'll be pretty well versed. You'll know, for example, that there is no Bank of America option at the very least. And that will help you feel a little bit more comfortable. Maybe start doing some paper trades and then you graduate to maybe, okay, you buy your first call, you buy your first put, that sort of thing. But yeah, we get a lot of these types of questions now. I love the new listeners. I love the new participants. It's a good thing for the market, but it scares me when people are clearly getting in over their heads into products that they just don't understand. That we have seen before in the industry, and it doesn't work out well. They end up losing money, and guess what? They get embittered by the options product, and they go away, and they don't come back. And that's not good for anyone. We want people to come in, but also learn what they're doing. In fact, I had this discussion with Doug Engman, the former chairman of the P-Coast, on Tuesday, and we were talking about maybe there should be a little bit more gating to the option space. These brokers have made it perhaps a little bit too easy. You open an account on a mobile app, click a button, fund it, bam, you're good to go. You buy the Bank of America option. And instead, maybe, particularly if you're going to start getting level 2, level 3, maybe if you request those, you have to answer a couple of questions about options first. He threw out pin risk. You should know what pin risk is to get level 3. Something like that. I would love to see more of that adopted in the space. I know it's contrary to what the brokers want. They want to open and fund as many accounts as possible. They don't want to put any barriers into that process. But this kind of question writ large across the entire industry is problematic. And we need to do something. We want to stop these people from trading, but we want them to only proceed when they actually know what they're doing. Otherwise, it's dangerous for everyone involved. So I encourage you, keep learning. Do some paper trading. And then maybe when the time comes, we can trade some Bank of America for real. Now we have to keep on rolling, though. It's time for our final segment. It's time to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, let's go around the block. Let's get some happier things. Let's go to Uncle Mike first. He always cheers me up. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what are you keeping an eye on for the rest of the week into the weekend?
Well, I'm looking at 4,300, I guess, because that's where the poll is to see where we're at with that. But
ain't getting there today, that's for sure. The worm has continued to turn, sir. You spooked this market today, sir. Off a full percent now.
Now we're going to have a 170 point rally the next 2 hours. Where's your
4,300? Here we come.
That's right. No, I was looking at that, seeing if we can get the all-time highs, because one thing, we did pull back to these levels earlier this week, and then we bounced off of the 4,100 level or thereabouts. And so seeing if we can hold again on that, continuing to watch that, and just watching how relatively quiet treasuries are right now in a market like this. So that's something that I'm keeping an eye on for sure. And although I don't have any positions in it, watching Bitcoin to see how that reacts to this little bit of a pullback that we have in the coming weeks. So that's what I'm watching.
All right, and I go out with great trepidation to the Rock Lobster one more time. We have regular listener J3 Dingle chiming in. He says, your audio distortions make you sound drunk, sir. So there you go. Do with that what you will. What are you watching for the rest of the week?
I'm sorry. Yes. Well, we'll see if what happens with since I can't see any market news right now. I don't even know where things are. I can't even close my position. But I thought we would we're kind of waiting for earnings. I think they're going to be kind of masked. So I don't expect to see the market do much, but I figure vol will just kind of slowly sort of peter out here into the beginning of the summer. So that's really all I'm looking at, on see if the landscape calms down a little bit.
Seems like your connection has calmed down a little bit, which is good. I know my audio editor is already going to hate me for having to clean up, shall we say, all of your audio from the show. Unfortunately, that music means it's time to go, at least for this show. But don't worry, if you want more in your ear holes, we'll be back in exactly half an hour to break down all the action, small caps, WTI. I'll have to look at the report. I haven't looked at the movers and shakers yet, see what's moving and shaking this week, what's going to make it on the TWIFO show. But before we go, let's go back around the horn. Let's start with the Uncle-list of Mikes. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what are you keeping an eye on? Or I should say, what should folks do if they want to follow you on Twitter, or perhaps check out your website full of content? Where should they go? What should they do?
By all means, follow me on Twitter at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW, or check out my website, stcharleswealth.com, if you're looking for a financial advisor who occasionally delves, and by occasionally meaning quite frequently, in the option product.
Check them out over there. I should say for Halal and everyone else who's new too, Uncle Mike has done a lot of great strategy blocks over the years on this show as well. And we're looking at some great way to maybe pull those out, make those something standalone you can go listen to on your own too if you want to just kind of learn about the options, because there's so much demand for education right now. So maybe a little bit of Uncle Mike in your life sometime down the road there, Halal, as well. And of course, the Rock Lobster in between his binge drinking in the early morning. Where should folks go if they want to check out all of your various mentoring?
Go to optionpit.com, go to memberships area, and look for my new product with a friend of mine, Frank, the starting lineup, coming out soon at Option Pit, teaching you how to manage a portfolio with options. It'll be pretty cool, and hopefully we'll make some money along the way, because that's what we're in here for. We're in here to make a couple bucks.
You guys are going crazy with the branding and the new products over there at Option Pit Land. Crazy town.
Growth is ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Growth is
all positive things.
Growth is a good thing. Check them out, optionpit.com. On behalf of the rockingest / drunkest of lobsters and the Uncle-list of Mikes and indeed myself. Maybe change his nickname to the Day Drinker. We'll explore it. Of course, see you back here in exactly half an hour for TWIFO. If you're listening after the fact on the podcast, just hit next. And, of course, back again tomorrow, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern for Vol Views. Probably, given today's action, going to have a lot to talk about tomorrow on Vol Views. And then back again on Monday, another episode of the Option Block.
This episode is sponsored by Demand Derivatives, a startup futures exchange and clearinghouse trading the world's major assets in a creative new way. You already trade on an exchange. Here is your chance to own one. Before they approach large strategic partners for funding, the pioneering team at Demand Derivatives launched a crowdfunding portal so that regular traders have the chance to buy shares. Learn more and become a part of this revolutionary fintech project now at demandderivatives.com/crowdfunding. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.